Well, I want to do the. You want to do the two stories after Anna, or let's do two quick stories. So one, this is really important. Peter Beinart was on CNN, and this story. First of all, Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib are going to be targeted by Republicans. They're going to be race-baited and demonized by Trump. They're going to be lied about by Fox News, all of this stuff. And the real striking cowardice and disgusting sort of breakout is the Chuck Schumers, the Nancy Pelosi's, the people who will throw them under the bus. The broader context and the broader reality is that everything that they're saying about what Israel and Palestine is this is objective reality. I mean, the objective description of Israel being a Jim Crow system in the occupied territories this is analogous. I mean, this is as close, and I'm always resisting this because politics is not math. It is not science, and it is not solved by those means.
It's not logic?
It is not logic. Those are second-order tools. But you have to understand power, you have to understand history, you have to understand the deeper dynamics that actually drive politics. But the objective description of what the situation is, what apartheid is in the Middle East, in Israel-Palestine, is, on the face of it, some of the most simple and clear things to understand in politics. If you have a historical understanding of the American South, if you have an understanding of apartheid South Africa, pre-democratic South Africa, you understand that. If you have an understanding of Western Sahara, some dynamics in Northern Ireland, though frankly, even though it was colonized and highly repressive, definitely not repressive to the same degree that the Palestinians are oppressed. Then you have a siege in Gaza. We can talk about the different political dynamics within Palestine. And as I always say, on one hand, it is absurd and ludicrous for anybody to demand and pass judgment on how anybody wages their struggle in a real situation like this. That is separate. So violence versus nonviolence, we have no comment on. That's not for us to talk about. We could talk about it strategically, maybe. Things like blowing up a roller skating rink of teenagers, which absolutely has happened in the past and Hamas is engaged in. Yes, we have to categorically reject that as wrong, because if we don't categorically reject certain tactics wielded by anybody, then we don't have a ground upon which to sort of establish some commonalities. That's apparent, and that's fine. But the reality is that the broader question of the rhetoric around struggle and violence of Palestine, nobody outside of Palestine should have any comment on it. Period. Full stop. Case closed. And also on a practical level, every discussion about violence, so-called, from the Palestinians, even though that has pretty much been entirely a non-factor, essentially in reality, for at least a decade, unless we're going to get into some type of farcical kites conversation, is whataboutism to obscure the resistance to apartheid. And the great irony is that the prime vehicle of that resistance that has any impact in the world is nonviolent boycott, divestment, and sanctions, which those who defend Israel anywhere, anytime, any place are more upset about than anything else. Peter Beinart is a moderate. He has a background as a far-right hawk. I guess he would call himself a liberal interventionist in terms of foreign policy. But he's a man of conscience. And really, I will say this as someone who spent some brief time in Ramallah myself, you would have to be devoid of any basic human response to not be disgusted by that situation. And this was a very important sort of clarity on CNN.
Palestinians don't have to be saints in order to deserve the basic rights that all of us take for granted, right? Miftah has said things that I disagree with. They made an anti-Semitic statement that they apologized for. The point is, when you go there, I say this as an American Jew. My children go to Jewish day school. I lead services in an Orthodox synagogue. Judaism is the center of my life. The first time I went to spend time with Palestinians in the West Bank, it was a shattering experience. The only thing I could imagine would be similar for American would be going to visit the Jim Crow South. When you see people living under the control of the state with no rights, They cannot become citizens. They cannot vote for the state that controls their lives. They do not have free movement. They need a pass to move from city to city. They live under a military legal system. The consequences are more brutal than we can imagine sitting here. So, do I agree with Miftah? Of course not. I had a close friend who was killed in a suicide bombing. But Palestinians don't. You could have made the same argument if you went to visit SNCC and said, oh, they were connected with communists. Some of their people have made anti-white statements. The point is, what Ilhan Omar said is the most important point. People need to go and see for themselves. I've never seen anyone who's gone and seen for themselves and not been transformed by the experience.
Anyone to be associated with a group that supports terrorism. And this isn't black or white. I mean, they publish this stuff. No one's forcing them to publish
years
this
ago,
stuff.
there were certain statements on their website. Hana Nasrawi has devoted her life as a nonviolent activist to opposing an oppression which none of us which does not accord with the values that any of us believe in as Americans.
So she doesn't control her own organization and what it publishes?
Rich, why don't you try spending a little bit of time focusing on the fact that almost $4 billion of U.S. aid is used to put children in detention.
You're the one distracting from the issue. I'm asking
no,
you.
This is the issue. You're distracting from the issue because National Review, just as National Review defended apartheid, and just as you defended segregation, you now defend Israel's oppression of Palestinian basic rights. It's a tradition for you guys.
Look, and if an organization supports terrorism, that organization should be beyond the pale.
And when Palestinians protest nonviolently, right, you discredit them as well.
So you're saying that, in some sense, justifies terrorism?
Of course it doesn't justify what they want. I've said again and again, I disagree with terrorism. What I'm saying is you're trying to distract from the real issue. The real issue is American complicity in the denial of basic Palestine.
Well, first of all, it's 100% right. And yes, it's absolutely, you are the legacy heir of apartheid and Jim Crow South if you defend Israel in its occupation and siege and denial of democratic rights. More broadly, I mean, this is something that's extraordinary to me because everybody picks their place to not want to, in this case, acknowledge the fundamental issue, which is the oppression of Palestinians. And two, nobody wants to deal with the simple, but apparently for a lot of people, disturbing reality that reasons and understanding is not justification. And that's an understanding that you need to apply to any number of situations in order to have a proper analysis. You've just watched a Michael Brooks show video, and you can watch all of our full main live shows every Tuesday night at around 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and subscribe to get all of the clips you want. We're covering the globe. We're focusing on international relations, the intellectual dark web. We're having fun. We're doing deep dives with a lot of amazing guests. Of course, become a patron for the whole thing at patreon.com/TMBS, or subscribe to this YouTube channel and help us keep growing and get that content out there. Subscribe below.